achieved.
So just prior to me finishing my research and starting the show, it has been announced that John Jones has officially, his B sample has officially failed the drug testing. And as a result, you have to assume he's in huge trouble now. That was his one opportunity to get out of this, or at least have some kind of wiggle room as to say, the B sample came back negative, must have been a tainted sample, and they can work around that. But quite honestly, he's in big trouble. That's what it comes down to. This is not one. This is multiple strikes against him. You look at this and you say, Daniel Cormier has brought up how does this affect his status as greatest of all time. You can't consider him greatest of all time now because you have to assume his performances have been enhanced by PEDs of some nature, and it's too bad because he was the type of guy who could come back and really help the sport continue to grow. He's an entertaining fighter, he's a fighter everybody wants to see, and it's really unfortunate what happened. But so we'll see how that plays out in the next little bit. But yeah, really unfortunate news. Now, as far as, again, I've been updating my BJJ scenario. Nothing really has transpired since I last talked to you guys. I have been doing a little bit more research. Again, that's what I do. I research, I study, I prepare that way. Because eventually I'm going to get another opportunity to get my ass handed to me, if you will. But I've been debating. There's two schools of thought, and they work, depends on who they are. They work for both people. I felt the last time I had any opportunity to actually accomplish anything, I rushed it. I went too fast, and obviously it didn't work out. But you look at it, and it's like you do one of two things. You either go lightning fast, you do things very quick, or you go determined or deliberate and heavy, strong, and you make sure every move you make is not a move that they can regard or power out of or do any. You got to really put that body weight. That's what I bring to the table is body weight and size. So I'm going to look to utilize that to my advantage and continue working forward. I've got a couple ideas, and as far as my one friend who's been the one that's been showing me how much I have to learn, I have another friend who I've been talking to, and he's been explaining a few things to me that I need to work on, or at least need to consider when engaging. So it's quite interesting that way. So I look forward to trying out a few new things and see if I can catch anybody off guard with what I bring to the table. But on that note, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we're breaking the upcoming UFC Fight Night 116 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it will take place on September 16th and feature Luke Rockhold, the former UFC middleweight champion, taking on the former WSOF middleweight and light heavyweight champion, David Branch. All of my preliminary predictions, all of my main card predictions, as is always the case, available here in the podcast. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, where you can check them out. You can also check out my bet packs for $15. I'm coming off a pretty piss poor showing at UFC 215. There were a number of upsets that certainly screwed things up for me. I think I went 4-7 overall. It just was not a good night. Not a good night at all. It was very unfortunate. And, it's time to get back. Of course, one fight show prior I didn't do a bet pack, and I went 8-4. So, you win some, you lose some. We'll have to move on. I feel pretty good about these picks so far that I've put together. I still have the 5 prelims I have to break down, but I'm very much excited about this card. It looks like a fun card to watch. And speaking of watching fights, let's get to that first main card prediction. We kick things off in the UFC's heavyweight division as Justin Ledet, undefeated at 8-0, takes on the debuting Zoo, the 8th Wonder, Anyanwu. I'm not going to say that correctly. 14 wins and 4 losses. Now, Ledet is coming into this fight 2-0 in the UFC. He's coming off a submission win over Mark Godbeer. He's a 28-year-old heavyweight prospect who I think has a lot of potential moving forward. I very much like what I see from him. Now, for Zoo, he is stepping up on incredibly short notice, replacing Sanofsky, who pulled out at the last second due to injury. Zoo had a contender fight back in July, Dana White contender fight, and was successful, and he got the call at the last minute to step up and take this opportunity. Physically, Ledet, 6'4", he is the taller man by 3 inches. Both men should weigh in roughly about 240, 245 pounds. And, looking at Ledet first, the guy has 2 wins by knockout, 5 submission victories, and 1 decision. He has 5 first-round finishes. He also has 3 third-rounders, so he's got a nice varied record when you look at it. For Zoo, 8 wins by knockout. He also has 2 KO defeats, 2 submission victories. He is 4-2 in the scorecards. He has lots of long fight experience. He has 3 fights that have gone into the 4th round or beyond. And he has, that's a nice thing for a young fighter to have under his belt. Now, Ledet comes from a boxing background. He uses a strong jab. We saw that in his first fight against Chase Sherman. He utilized that jab very effectively, kept it in his face, really did a lot of damage, and on top of that, limited what Sherman was able to offer back. He utilizes an incredibly relaxed style, moves very well. He's very quick for a heavyweight, and because of that style he uses, it allows him to go deeper into fights and still maintain that output, still maintain that offense, because he is so relaxed, so loose, and doesn't force and muscle technique. I said he used that lead left jab. He'll double it up. He'll lead with a left hook periodically to try and mix things up. And I like the way he punches and changes levels for a takedown. Very effective technique. In his debut, he landed 113 significant strikes, which is big numbers for a heavyweight. Sherman was able to hold up and go the whole distance, but still, that's a lot of offense for a guy his size. But the big thing is, despite his striking background, again, he has relied on his grappling at times. He has shown some solid grappling skills. Against Godbeer, he landed an exceptionally nice takedown. Again, changing levels of putting him on the back. Godbeer threw strikes. We saw Ledet again ducked under him and drove through his hips. Eventually on that mat, he was able to scramble his way to the back, locked in a rear naked choke, and as I said, he has 5 submission wins. So very talented grappler with a good striking, base as well. I really like Justin Ledet. He's a good fighter. Now for Tszyu, he was struggling early in his fight on the contender fight. He was getting hit a lot. Wasn't really being active enough. He was moving forward and keeping the pressure on, but the volume just wasn't there. And a lot of people point to the pressure of fighting in this scenario where you're looking for a possible contract. You got to win. At the same time, you have to win effectively and win impressively to get an opportunity to actually fight in the UFC. That can affect the fighter's performance. We did see some surprising dexterity out of his legs. Good head kicks for a man his size. He throws a hard right hand in succession. That seems to be his primary weapon of choice. Once he pushes his opponent against the cage and kind of limits their distance, that's where he starts to let that right hand go and can do damage. He ultimately finished the fight with a big right hand knockout, just caught his opponent, at the end of it and dropped him, obliterated him. He had more success landing once he upped his volume and varied his attack, started targeting the body with some shots, worked in the odd kick, and then boom, that power right hand was finding its mark more frequently. When you look at how these two individuals line up, Ledet is just too big. He's superior quality of experience, even though he has less fights. He moves too well. That jab is going to keep Tszyu way out of range. It's going to short circuit his already kind of limited striking offense, keep him from landing those power strikes that are probably ineffective at best, unless he sets them up. But that jab will really shut that down. On top of that, you throw the short notice and the debut factors in, and it's unless a freak knockout comes, it's going to be a shocking. It's going to be very difficult for Tszyu to pick up the victory here. So my prediction is Justin Ledet to defeat Tszyu Anyanwu by, we'll say, submission. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division and features the 13th ranked fighter in the division, Kamaru, the Nigerian Nightmare Usman, with a record of 10 wins and 1 loss, taking on the Panther, Sergio Moraes of Brazil, with a current record of 12 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. Now, what we have here is a matchup of wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of the highest order. Usman, a former NCAA Division II wrestler who has translated those skills exceptionally well to the octagon, taking on Sergio Moraes, who is an elite-level BJJ black belt, one of the best in the UFC. I'm thinking, Jotko and Maya might be the only 2 guys better than him. Very impressive performance, skill both in the UFC and beyond. Now, looking at Usman first, he is 5-0 in the UFC, 9 straight wins overall, 5 wins by knockout, 1-1 on the scorecards, 4-0 in fights ended by decision. His only loss was a submission loss, but it was in the second career fight of his pro career, so he's certainly come a long way since. For Moraes, he's undefeated over his last 7 fights. If you had said, name me a fighter who hasn't lost in their last 7 trips to the octagon, I would not have picked Sergio Moraes with my first 25 picks. During that stretch, he is 6-0-1 with a draw mixed in. For his career, 1-1 in fights ended by knockout, 7 submission wins, not surprisingly, and 4-1 on the scorecards. Physically, both men are 6 feet tall. Usman is 4 inches. Both men 6 feet tall. Usman will have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he is the younger man by 5 years. Now, with both individuals coming from a grappling background, they have been working diligently to round out their striking attack to improve their overall game. And this fight could very well come down to who has come further, who is the better man on the feet. Before we get there, let's look at some of the numbers. Usman averages 4.52 takedowns per fight at a 50% completion rate. That's pretty impressive. For every 2 shots he takes, he lands one of them, and he's closing, over 4.5 takedowns per fight. That can be overwhelming. He's also never been taken down. So that's, certainly is a concern for Sergio Moraes if he opts to try and get this fight to the ground. Now, for Moraes, his number's not nearly as lofty, just 1.16 takedowns at a 30% completion rate. He landed 4 takedowns in the second second UFC bout, has landed nothing even close to that since, usually 1 or 2. 75% takedown defense, but again, he's the type of guy where you don't want, people aren't looking to take him down. I think he's only been taken down actually once. It was by Omari Akhmedov. But, Moraes is the type of guy, once he gets the fight to the ground, he has the ability to finish it or keep you there, so he doesn't really need those overwhelming takedown numbers. For Usman, he likes to use clinch fighting and takedowns to break down his opponent. When he fought Hector Hassan, he set up the triangle by simply overwhelming him and then eventually tiring him out and finishing him. Lots of different takedown techniques, which is something I really like out of Kamaru. We'll see him use clinch takedowns. He'll shoot a single. He'll shoot a double. He'll come from far across the cage. He'll set it up with his strikes. It keeps opponents guessing. If you don't know exactly what technique he's going to throw at you, it's very difficult to defend against. Once he gets his opponent to the ground, strong top control. He throws hard ground and pound. He constantly is working and punching and throwing offense. He forces his opponent to work hard, and he forces him to carry his weight, and that by itself is exhaustive. The big question is, will he consider going to the ground with Moraes, or will he use his wrestling in reverse to keep this fight standing? I would think at some point he's going to want to test himself on the mat from top position, but as a smart fighter, which I really respect the way he fights, I think he's going to look to try and tire Moraes out early before he opts to go down, and especially get him sweaty and take away that factor where Moraes might be able to get a hold of him and latch on and lock up something. His striking, again, still a work in progress, but it's getting better. He throws short punches, he'll work in some elbows, knees in the clinch, again, fake takedowns and land strikes, which is a very effective way to improve your offense, or improve your striking offense based on something else you already do very well. Look for him to throw a left jab. He dips down and wings punches over the top from the right side. It's a technique I like to see him clean up just a little bit too much wind up. He's better when he fights compact and really gets on the inside and really lets his hands go, but doesn't throw those big power punches. He's got natural power. You don't have to force it. I do like the way he keeps his opponents backing up. He pressures them. He forces them on the defensive. And just overall, he's coming around quite nicely. I like the fact that he used the threat of the takedown to improve his striking offense. Now, for Sergio, his last submission came back in 2013. He is 3-0-1 in decisions, but he has 2 of those fights have have been split decisions, and he has a come-from-behind victory over Akhmedov, which cost me a shit ton of money. Oh, that was difficult. Akhmedov, I had on the scorecards late in the third round, gets knocked out. But what I'm saying here is Moraes he's got on a pretty impressive 6-0-1 run, but he's had some fights that were very, very close. The draw, split decision, another one, the Akhmedov win. It's been very razor thin as far as some of his victories are concerned. Now, the big thing with Sergio, despite his ground pedigree, he has really moved away from his grappling game. He still remains a constant threat, but it's not the focal point of his attack. And that's probably the reason for the much closer fights. He does only need one opportunity to finish on the ground or get them down, at least grind at a decision. But, again, he seems to want to entertain fans. Go out there and throw heavy leather and see what happens. He has smothering top control. He's constantly looking to advance position. Capable submission fighter, no doubt about that. Capable of locking up a submission at any point in time. But again, at times he seems more content to hold top position and not look for that sub. Hence, he's gone back that far, 2013 since his last tap out. Very similar to his opponent, striking still a work in progress. He tends to force his punches. He does have some power, but nothing overwhelming. When you look at these two, Usman is an elite on the feet, but he's getting better. And I think he can still work for takedowns, especially as this fight hits the second half if Moraes starts to slow down. I think overall Usman's a better athlete. He has better cardio. He's quicker. He will outwork Moraes. I think he does more with his striking overall. And my prediction is Kamaru Usman to defeat Sergio Moraes by decision. Bouncing right along, we are now in the UFC's lightweight division as Gregor the Gift Gillespie, undefeated at 9-0, takes on Jason Gonzalez with a current record of 11 wins and 3 defeats. Now, Gillespie's undefeated, as I said. He's 2-0 in the UFC, coming off a 21-second knockout at UFC 210. For Gonzalez, he was KO'd in brutal fashion in his debut by Drew Dober, but he's coming off a submission win over JC Contrell, which was, a first-round submission win, very impressive. I really, like the determination I saw out of him to get that victory. Physically, Gonzalez is a very tall lightweight. 6'2". He'll be 5 inches taller than Gillespie. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he is the younger man by 4 years. Looking at Gillespie first, he's got 4 knockouts on his record, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. 6 first-round finishes overall. Gonzo, 4 knockouts, 7-1 in fights ended by submission, 2 losses by knockout, so worth noting there, and 7 first-round victories. He's never gone the distance in any of his fights. Gillespie is a highly decorated NCAA Division I national wrestling champion, not just a competitor, a champion. And we've seen him, not surprisingly, wrestling is the focal point of his offense. 5 takedowns in his debut. He didn't need any in his last fight because he was just so quick. It would be interesting to see how he fared against a guy like Andrew Holbrook, who's a talented grappler and can work off his back and has had success attacking with his guard. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that play out. We have seen in the past, prior to coming to the UFC, there have been some issues with Gillespie being too takedown focused, too unwilling to alter his attack and deviate from what he originally was attempting to do. Keep shooting, keep getting shut down, and possibly costing him, his physical, his cardio failing a little bit, starting to slow down, and staying. Obviously, he's won those fights, but it hasn't been a pretty fight, hasn't been a dominant fight like he's looking to have. When he is successful, he's very good at driving through his opponent's hips, connects those hands, and really plants them on the mat very effectively. His striking, I keep saying this, I've said this for the last couple, was still very much a work in progress, but again, against Holbrook, he landed some nice short punches on the inside. His hands looked quick, they had pop, and eventually he finished him, knocked him out. And when you have an elite level fighter like Gillespie, as far as his wrestling is concerned, he is going to learn, he's going to pick up skills, and he's going to translate his athletic ability into other aspects of this game and get better, and that's what I think we're seeing here. Now for Gonzalez, he has finished all of his wins, and he's been finishing all of his defeats. So that's worth stating right there. He's had just a single fight out of the opening round over his last 9 appearances. He's aggressive. He likes to move forward when engaging. He'll work in the clinch with knees and elbows, which kind of negates that height and reach advantage that he has over a lot of his opponents. He'll throw a variety of kicks at distance. He'll work in some long punches. When he hit Cottrell with a hard uppercut, he really stunned him, which shows he does have some pop behind his hands. On the flip side, though, his takedown defense has been a major concern. He will attack off his back, but he can be taken down, he can be kept down, and if you're not grabbing submissions off your back, you're probably losing the fight. He was getting run over on the mat by JC prior to eventually getting the finish. His submission skills and his scrambling skills kept him moving and kept him in the fight, but Cottrell was doing better, was on top, holding his own. Eventually, there was a mistake made, and Jason was able to get up and lock in a Darce and really just rallied from nowhere to pick up the victory. Ultimately, in this fight, Gonzalez is just very hittable. I think he's going to struggle with those short, compact strikes with Gillespie, especially as he looks to close the distance. But I think the key here is going to be the takedowns, both the threat of the takedowns and the actual execution of the takedowns. I think Gonzalez is going to be a little hesitant to engage simply because he knows Gillespie is so good on the ground and can change levels and put him on the ground with relative ease. That's going to impact his striking, and we're also going to see Gillespie land takedowns and take him, control the position on the ground. That lower stature will make for easier level changes for Gregor, and he's going to be able to elevate Gonzalez and put him down. I think Gillespie has to avoid staying too committed to shooting if they're not landing early on, but I think ultimately he will push deeper into this fight, embrace the grind if he can't get the early finish, and my prediction is Gregor Gillespie to defeat Jason Gonzalez by knockout. Fight number 4 in the main card takes place in the UFC's middleweight division. Will feature former Bellator champion and almost on the verge of being UFC washout Hector Lombard, 34 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw, and 2 no contest, taking on Strikeforce veteran Anthony Lionheart Smith, currently holding an almost equally as impressive or the equally experienced record of 27 wins and 12 losses. Now, Lombard has lost 3 fights in a row. He is winless in 4. He's struggled to hold on. He's struggling to hold some form of traction. Obviously, his past experience and success in Bellator is what has him still here. He is 1-4 in the UFC, fighting at 185 pounds. That's a very concerning record. For Smith, since returning to the UFC, obviously he had one early showing where he was 1 and done. He's gone 1-3 in the promotion, coming off back-to-back knockout victories, and he became the first man to stop Elvis Mutapsik, which is very impressive to see him put him away. Physically, Smith at 6'4", he is 7 inches taller than Hector Lombard. He'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 10 years. So all of the physical stats favoring Lionheart here. Lombard, 19 wins by knockout, 7 submission wins, 8-5 on the scorecards. He has been knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights. You have to start wondering if that durability is gone. He is pushing 40. For Smith, 13 wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission, so very impressive finishing numbers there. Just 2-1 on the scorecards, not a lot of experience going deep into fights. On the flip side of things, he has been knocked out 6 times. He has been submitted 5 times, which are very big numbers. But if you delve a little bit deeper into his record, his last knockout came in 2011, so you can see he's matured as a fighter a little bit. And his last 3 submission defeats, all back in 2013, last one came back in 2013. 2 of them came against incredibly talented BJJ. I'm talking elite level guys, Hodger Gracie and Antonio Braga Neto, guys who are incredibly talented on the mat. So it's not surprising, he got submitted, and really, there's no shame in that. Now, looking at Lombard first, he comes from a judo background. Very strong. He's difficult to take off his feet. He can score takedowns if he opts to go that route. He scored a couple of takedowns in each of his last fights, but, the unfortunate thing is he hasn't done enough of it to make it an impact, and he's lost the fights as a result. As far as the striking is concerned, he's got a lot of power. He opts to sit at range, and leap into his attacks. He throws a hard right hook. He'll gauge that distance with a pawing right hand before he actually looks to attack. When he fought Dan Henderson, he dropped him with a left hook. He was swarming Dan, very similar to Neil Magny, where he was attacking him. He's all over him, and then he didn't get him out of there, and he lost the fight as a result. Cardio for Lombard has been a major concern. When he fights at his own pace, he can go a full 3 rounds, but it also makes the fights much closer, especially if he's not able to do any damage on the feet and just, relies on his volume. If he pushes forward, he absolutely can score a stoppage victory, or he can gas out, lose a decision, or get stopped himself. Looking at Anthony Smith, he offers a nice mix of danger and at times frustration. He's a very talented fighter. I've been following him since his days back in Strikeforce. He can really do it all, but he can also be beaten almost anywhere. At his best, he's moving forward. He's looking to overwhelm and engage his opponents, especially on the cage, but use that pressure, use that volume, and get the better of them. Again, he does very good work in the clinch, pin opponent on the wall, unload with short punches, slashing elbows, and break them down, making an ugly, ugly fight, and hurt them and finish them. His takedown defense, though, has been an area of concern. He's been taken down multiple times in fights, including 6 in his loss to Cesar Ferreira, 4 in his victory over Andrew Sanchez, where he came back and stopped him late in that fight. He will attack off his back. He's got a pretty good guard. Again, he's got those long limbs, which makes him very dangerous. We saw him sweep Andrew Sanchez early in that fight, but then he relies too much on his ability to get out of bad spots, and if he can't do that like he couldn't against Ferreira, he is in serious trouble. His gas tank isn't bad, but it's not great. Sanchez gassed in that last fight. It could have been the constant work ethic of Smith early on, forcing him to work. It could have been some of the damage was done up. So again, he doesn't have a great gas tank, but it's good enough to get the job done against a lot of people. Looking at Lombard, his takedown and top game is very heavy, similar to what Ferreira did against Smith. And I think he's going to put Smith on his back, and Smith's not going to be able to buck him off. But the big question is going to be what happens in round 2 and 3 when Smith does get back to his feet. Can he avoid getting taken down? Can he slow Lombard down enough to do what he needs to do to win this fight? Smith still has the ability to do damage and attack, but he's going to lose this fight positionally if he's on his back too much. Lombard's cardio and durability are major concerns, but his experience, I think, is going to allow him to stay composed, stay focused, exploit Smith's major weakness. Also, I think Lombard's way too strong in the clinch where Smith does some of his best work. Smith at times tends to be a little bit too apprehensive when he's not closing the distance, but ultimately my prediction is Hector Lombard to defeat Anthony Smith by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, UFC 170-pounders square off as Platinum Mike Perry, record of 10 wins and 1 loss, takes on former welterweight title challenger Thiago Pitbull Alves of Brazil, currently holding a record of 26 wins and 11 defeats. Now, Perry is coming off a rebound victory after he suffered the first loss of his career, where he knocked out Jake Ellenberger in impressive fashion. He did lose to Alan Jouban one fight prior. For Thiago Alves, he is also coming off a victory defeating Patrick Cote. He is one fight removed from a very unsuccessful attempt to move down to lightweight, where he lost to Jim Miller and recognized that welterweight is the best place for him. Physically, Perry 1 inch taller, he'll have a 1 inch reach advantage, and he is 8 years younger than the former title challenger. Now, looking at Alves first, he is brutal Muay Thai. Some of the best leg kicks in the game. He effectively turns that hip over and just breaks opponents down when he's able to connect. When he fought Jordan Mein, he was really struggling with the reach early on, but he landed that brutal body shot and put him away. It only takes one opportunity for him to change the complexion of a fight. He throws very short, compact strikes. I like the way he ducks down and throws those counter hooks over the top against an opponent that's coming in, really rolls and fires those big power shots. When he fought Patrick Cote, he was very aggressive early on, pushing forward, moved well. He dropped Cote with a counter left hook on 2 different occasions, and Cote, again, known for his chin. So he tells you what kind of power Alves is packing. Once on the inside, look for him to land hard knees, use that Muay Thai clinch on the inside and land some hard knees to the body and really try to break his opponent down. Some of the issues for Alves have been his cardio and his takedown defense, but he appears to have cleaned some of that up, and that's something that just makes him a better fighter overall. Against Patrick Cote, again, he went offensive with his wrestling, landed a couple of takedowns, and did a good job there. That's something, I don't know if we'll see that against Mike Perry, but at least it's something Alves feels comfortable enough to potentially attempt. Now, Perry, he's got big power. He hits hard with everything he throws. He tends to throw a lot of single strikes. He'll work a left jab, some hard low kicks as well. He does a nice job of keeping pressure on. He holds his hands a little bit low. He's not afraid to get hit and kind of almost invites his opponents in to try and hit him, and relies on the fact that his chin's going to hold up and he wants to find their chin and put them away. Against Jake Ellenberg, he tried to fight a little bit smarter early on in that fight, more disciplined. He feels he has issues avoiding the aggression factor, but at the same time, his corner said you need to up your offense. You need to find a happy medium, be more aggressive, but at the same time, don't go nuts. When he fought Gyunhoo Lim, he landed a beautiful counter left hand that put him down. He did the same, counter right hand. He did the same thing against Hot Chocolate Danny Roberts, put him down. He throws some hard kicks and knees once inside in the clinch. Jake Ellenberger, who's he's known for having some chin issues, but still he's a very good fighter. We saw eventually when Perry started to pick up the pace a little bit and engage, he hurt him early on and then eventually landed an elbow finish for the knockout. So very impressive finishing skills there. As far as his ability to go deep into fights where he can't get the finish, at least not early on, we saw him slow down a little bit against Roberts. He started strong against Alan Jouban and again had a drop off and just couldn't maintain that pace, couldn't keep up and lost the fight as a result. Ellenberger, I think, won the first round of that fight, was landing some good shots, throwing, Perry was throwing way too many singles. He was leaping in. He was reaching. He wasn't landing enough. He was exposing himself and getting countered as a result. And I think that's going to be the issue here. Perry has power, but Alves has power and technique. Far superior technique. Perry needs to pressure him and wear him down and really push him. But at the same time, that walks him into that counter range where we're going to see Alves really attack. Look for Alves to land counters to Perry's single strikes. Those leg kicks, I think you're going to see him do damage to the midsection and really take away Perry's ability to push forward, slow him down. Perry's never out to fight with the power he has. But he will have to limit his, he will have limited opportunities to get the job done, and that drops off as the fight goes. My prediction is Thiago Alves to defeat Platinum Mike Perry by decision. In the main event of the evening, we have former Strikeforce and UFC middleweight champion, number 3 ranked fighter in the division, Luke Rockhold, finally returning to action, 15 wins and 3 losses, taking on longtime veteran, the number 9th ranked fighter in the division, David Branch, WSOF, World Series of Fighting, lightweight and middleweight champion, currently holding a record of 21 wins and 3 defeats. Now, the middleweight division continues to almost cannibalize itself. You've got these contenders who are looking to sort things out, and while Michael Bisping is fighting Dan Henderson, while Michael Bisping is fighting George St. Pierre, they're taking each other out, and we're seeing less and less guys move up the ladder and get an opportunity to fight. And that for the title, and that's certainly concerning. Obviously, the winner of this fight gets a huge opportunity to step forward. The loser slips down and has to go back into the Shark Tank with guys like Jacare and Yoel Romero. That's terrifying. Rockhold's coming off a title fight loss to Michael Bisping and a long layoff. So that post-title fight letdown is certainly a factor here. He had won 5 in a row since his debut loss to Vitor Belfort. For Branch, he has won 11 consecutive fights. As I said, he won both titles for World Series of Fighting. He went 10-0 in the promotion. He's coming off a split decision win over Krzysztof Jotko in his UFC debut. It wasn't a bad fight. It wasn't a great fight, but it was a win. That's all that matters, really. Physically, Rockhold 3-inch taller. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage. Actually, sorry, Branch has the 1-inch reach advantage, and Luke is the younger man by 3 years. Looking at David Branch first, he is a BJJ black belt and a very talented grappler. Very good on the mat, good posture, excellent control once he gets there. He will work in some ground and pound, and submissions are always a possibility, especially if he can get past his guard. Really can work, do wonders once he breaks down his opponent's guard. His record: 5 wins by knockout, 7 submission wins, 9-1 in fights that go the distance. He has 1 loss each by knockout and submission. When you look at his record in WSOF, he fought some lower level guys. He fought some noteworthy opponents. Every time he fought a noteworthy opponent, or almost every time, he went the distance, which raises some eyebrows about the level of competition he's able to put away and where he is at. As far as his skills are concerned, he opens up throwing, again, in his last fight, he opened up throwing the hard overhand right, pumping out the left jab, but his overhand right was a little bit too wild, a little too ineffective for me. He'll work in some kicks, which, is a nice technique, especially if it helps you to reach your opponent, but still his striking did not impress me, other than his jab being not too bad. His takedown game was decent. He landed a nice level change for a takedown against Jotko, timed him, caught him coming forward, planted him on the mat. When he wasn't able to score takedowns, his next best situation was the clinch and pin his opponent on the wall. Good head position to really hold them there and allow him to control the position and land some strikes. When he was taken down or threatened on the ground, he did a good job of getting his hips out and getting back to his feet. His output did seem to drop off a bit in the middle rounds. His punches he was reaching a little bit for them, and as a result, it was a close fight. He wasn't nearly as effective as he was hoping to be with his offensive output. Now for Rockhold, he's been out a long time. He's had some issues with the UFC. He's had some injuries. He needs to get it going. He needs to get back in the mix. Now, prior to the Michael Bisping defeat, he was very confident. He looked very good in his fights. He just seemed almost invincible. I love the Chris Weidman fight. I picked him to win that fight by TKO. I was very impressed with the performance in that matchup. And, as much as I love the fact that Michael Bisping took him out, it's unfortunate to see how far Luke Rockhold fell after winning that belt from Weidman. Some of the things Rockhold does very well, that constant pressure. He's not frantic when he attacks. He stalks forward, really intimidates opponents by how calmly he's able to walk them down and put them in some bad spots. His numbers: 4 knockouts, 4 wins by knockout, 9 submission wins, only 2 wins on the scorecards. The big thing now, though, with Michael Bisping loss, 3 defeats by knockout. That has to be a bit of a concern that you wonder about his chin. Is he a little bit chinny? Rockhold is at his best. He's got two areas where he's very strong, and one of them is his grappling game. He's a long, lanky guy. He's physically able to control his opponents, wraps them up on the mat, rides them effectively, lands ground and pound, and again, submissions. He has a variety of submissions to call upon to get the job done. He's good in scrambles. He'll attack subs once he gets that position where he feels he can do it, or he'll just roll into a superior position and land some hefty ground and pound. Early on against Weidman, an NCAA Division I wrestler, he was able to fend off some takedowns. When he was taken down, he did a good job of attacking and getting back up to a better position. And again, just constantly forcing his opponents to work and not allowing them to feel comfortable. The other area that Luke Rockhold is very strong is his kicking offense. He has a very good kicking game. Back leg round kick to the body is a southpaw, which is worth noting. He throws hard low kicks, he throws hard body kicks, and he throws hard high kicks. He can do a heck of a lot of damage. He hurt Bisping in their first fight with a head kick, eventually putting him away. His hands aren't bad, but they're not the best. He throws a lead left hook. He'll double it up. He throws some counters. He had Machida hurt a couple of times. He'll work some knee strikes into the clinch. But again, his bread and butter is his kicking offense. Against Bisping, I don't know if it was overconfidence. He was leaving his chin up. He tends to do that a little bit. He was leaving his chin up. He was getting drawn into some striking exchanges where he got cracked and eventually finished. I remember back when he beat Jotko for the Strikeforce title, he was putting himself in some positions where he was vulnerable. And it wasn't the most ideal scenario. He was in a little bit of trouble where, he was fighting, but he was exposing himself, and Jotko was able to capitalize, not enough, but still it was worth noting. Branch relies too much on his takedowns to win this fight, or at least in most scenarios. His takedowns and grappling are too crucial to his success. I think he's going to struggle to do that against Luke Rockhold. Not a lot of people are going to out-grapple Luke Rockhold. I think Luke's kicks will make it hard for Branch to close the distance, to get in range to shoot for takedowns, or to get in range to land strikes. He'll take away his base with his inside leg kicks, those hard low kicks. He'll hurt him to the body. He'll potentially land a head kick. Over 5 rounds, it's difficult to see Luke Rockhold not landing something that will eventually put David Branch down. And my prediction is Luke Rockhold to defeat David Branch by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 116 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. All of my preliminary picks, as is always the case, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. Consider buying the bet packs. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. I'm on Facebook as well. You can go check that out. We got a lot of fights coming up. I think we get one more show, and then we get a break. We got the UFC 216 and UFC 217 looming. Those are going to be excellent cards. A lot of fun action coming up in the UFC to round out the year, which I'm very much looking forward to. There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to. So, on that note, I will say, as I always do, thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate everyone who tunes in to listen to my show. And take care, guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.